Unfortunately, we have to deal with a heavy topic for the daily cancellation today. It's heavy, but it's also a big topic and one that can be difficult to fully kind of wrap your arms around. Here's the story from the Daily Mail. They report that a morbidly obese traveler, quote, has divided opinion after sharing a viral TikTok slamming Ryanair for the size of its seats, with some critics telling her it was not the airline's fault. Now, it's basically a monthly tradition at this point that a fat airline passenger complains on TikTok about the fact that planes are not being redesigned to specifically accommodate their hefty frame. This is right in line with those other complaints. The Daily Mail continues. Kirsty Leanne, 29, from Shropshire, filmed the clip while flying with the budget carrier, revealing how she struggled to fit down the plane's narrow aisle, couldn't use the tray table due to lack of space, and could barely move in the tiny toilet cubicle. Kirsty, who blogs about her experiences traveling as a size 24 to 26, wanted to highlight issues she encounters to others. Recalling the problematic flight, Kirsty explained, "The first issue I faced was walking down the plane aisle. I was one of the last people on the plane because I was running a little late, so I felt the stares of people. All I could think was that they didn't want me to sit next to them." The plus-size blogger also revealed how she was unable to do work because she didn't have space to use the tray table. She said, "I was going to use the tray table to do some work on the way, but when I couldn't put it down, I quickly decided that it was not going to happen." Meanwhile, she continued, "The bathroom was another issue I faced. Unfortunately, it's probably one of the smallest bathrooms I've ever seen, and I decided against trying to squeeze in." She continues with this horror story in greater detail, but you probably get the gist. Apparently, Kirsty does this for a living, or at least as a hobby. She travels around and complains when she's too fat to do certain things. According to her TikTok account, her mission is to push for greater plus-sized representation in the travel industry. Although you could argue that plus-sized people already have, a very large representation. Now, we've talked plenty of times in the past about the so-called body positivity movement, which encourages people to display their positive attitudes about their bodies by destroying their bodies. This is what makes body positivity one of the most self-contradictory and also destructive ideas to come along in quite some time. And it manages to stand out even amid all the other self-contradictory and destructive ideas that are so popular these days. But we're not going to dwell specifically on that aspect of it. We're also going to leave aside the point that, if I'm being honest, part of me actually hopes that the obese community gets their way, plays the victim card successfully, and forces planes to better accommodate them. Because the end result is that we would all get bigger seats and more legroom, I guess, which would be kind of nice. Of course, that's assuming that the concession doesn't involve setting aside a special area on the plane just for fat people where only they get the extra room. Maybe first class will be abolished and replaced with fat class. Fat people will be rewarded with, premium first class seats and even better, the first class food. So come to think of it, that's actually probably exactly what would end up happening. So I take back what I said a moment ago. Anyway, I want to turn our attention to another aspect of this situation, which lies a little deeper. And you can only see it when you sort of trim the fat away. No pun intended, of course. I'm not the kind of person who would bring up this discussion as nothing more than a vehicle to make fat puns. That's not who I am. Instead, I'm struck by the important truth about human nature that this story and stories like it illustrate for us. After all, the fat acceptance movement is supposed to be all about freedom, right? People should be free to be whatever size they want, and the world's job is to accommodate their girth, however gargantuan it might be. But as always, our culture promotes a kind of freedom which is really, in the end, slavery. When you do whatever you want, you exercise no self-control. You exercise not at all in general, and simply follow the whims of the flesh, you end up trapped in a nightmare of your own making. This woman is so free that she can't even fit on a plane. She's so free that she can't fully participate in society. She's so free that she's probably going to die before she reaches the age of 60. This is the freedom of the modern world, the freedom that makes you a slave to your compulsions, the freedom that leads ultimately to annihilation. And fat acceptance is just one example. There are many others, often quite a bit more serious. How about, to return to the topic of the day, the freedom granted to women to kill their unborn children? This is a freedom that deprives you of something good and true and fulfilling. It deprives a woman of herself in many ways. It deprives her of the opportunity to be transformed by the love for and from her child. It robs her of everything, consigns her to a life of regret and loss and guilt. And then we call it freedom. Dostoevsky noticed this about the modern world way back in the 1800s when he wrote The Brothers Karamazov, which includes this passage. He writes, "The world has proclaimed the reign of freedom, especially of late. But what do we see in this freedom of theirs? Nothing but slavery and self-destruction. For the world says, You have desires, and so satisfy them. For you have the same rights as the most rich and powerful. Don't be afraid of satisfying them and even multiplying your desires. That is the modern doctrine of the world, in that they see freedom. And what follows from this right of multiplication of desire? In the rich, isolation and spiritual suicide. In the poor, envy and murder. For they have been given rights, but have not been shown the means of satisfying their wants. They maintain that the world is getting more and more united, more and more bound together in brotherly community, as it overcomes distance and sets thoughts flying through the air. But put no faith in such a bond of union. Interpreting freedom as the multiplication and rapid satisfaction of desire, men distort their own nature, for many senseless and foolish desires and habits and ridiculous fancies are fostered in them. Now, Dostoevsky noticed this about Western culture as he observed it from Russia in the year 1880. And he couldn't have known just how right he was. There's probably never been a better definition of the modern conception of freedom than the one that he offers right there. Freedom is the multiplication and satisfaction of desire. But that's not freedom at all. It is, as he points out, isolation, envy, hatred, suicide. That's what this kind of freedom gets you. You aren't even free to walk down the aisle of a passenger plane. You're left hampered, disabled, helpless, screaming out like a child, demanding that the world conform itself to you. You're not going to find any freedom in such a life. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.